Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today is March the 26th. It is 5:03 p.m. Welcome to another exciting version of the Housing and Real Property Subcommittee. Today, we're going to be discussing four bills in this order: HB 911, SB 63, SB 513, and SB 436. And just as always, to let everyone know, this is as part of our rules for the subcommittee meetings, then everyone who is not a member of the subcommittee should mute themselves and not display your photo. All the persons who are members of the subcommittee must be in full view and maintain order as is discussed by normal parliamentary procedure. With that, we're going to start with HB 911, and HB 911 is landlord tenant family child care homes. And Ben, if you could do us a favor and give us a brief overview on this particular bill, and then a brief overview on this, and then go through the amendments thereof. Thank you, Ben.
Okay, thank you, Chair Holmes. This bill, HB 911, there's no state or local fiscal impact. There are amendments. They were distributed to the subcommittee. I'll go through the amendments and the bill. The bill concerns the rental, though, of single-family dwellings and family childcare homes. Family childcare home is a residence in which family childcare is provided for up to 8 children. This bill applies to family childcare homes in just single-family dwellings. So the bill as amended applies just to the single-family dwellings, and the amendments remove multifamily dwellings. The bill also does not apply to owner-occupied dwellings or prohibitions on family child care homes that may be imposed by the governing documents of a condominium or a cooperative housing corporation. The bill does allow a landlord to impose a security deposit for 2 months' rent if they are going to operate if the tenant's going to operate a family child care home. So under the bill, a landlord cannot prohibit a tenant from operating a family child care home on the leased premises. They cannot refuse to, and this includes a couple of things, refusing to, in paragraph 2 there, lines 18 through 23, they cannot refuse to offer to lease. They cannot impose unreasonable limitations on the use of the premises as a family child care home or act in bad faith. There are a number of, I guess you could say, landlord conscious provisions as well. The landlord is not liable for any act or omission of a tenant relating to the operation of a family child care home. A tenant has to give notice to the landlord at least 60 days before operating a family child care home on the premises, which was previously 30. Before commencing the operation, a tenant's also required to do a number of things. They need to provide the landlord with their registration to operate as a family child care home, their certificate of insurance naming the landlord as an additional insured. And then there's a couple of parts here where a landlord can require a tenant to purchase liability insurance with coverage limits of not more than $1 million in connection with the tenant's operation of a family child care home. And then if there's a lapse in the coverage, the tenant has to cease operation of the family child care home. So that is the bill as amended, Chair Holmes. There was some testimony from MMHA and AOBA who are opposed to multifamily dwellings, but that's been removed from the bill. There was concern by the Maryland Realtors that the 2-month security deposit wasn't enough for possible issues that could arise with a family child care home. But yeah, that's the bill, Chair Holmes.
I move the amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the amendments. We're now in the discussion phase of the amendments. Let me see whose hands up. Regina Boyce, your hand is, Delegate Boyce, your hand is up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to I want to play scenarios out so that I can understand how this bill would work. Let's start from I already rent a single family home. I then decide that I'm going to manage a daycare and therefore put in provisions to do so. At this point, does this bill say that I need permission from the landlord?
Yes.
One. And then two, it's also saying the landlord can't refuse the use. And so I go through the process. I tell the landlord I'm opening a at-home daycare, that I have certain things put in place. I need to have the state come and inspect the property so that it can be determined whether or not it is viable for a child care facility. And in that case, they could come and say it is not, right?
Well, let's pause there for a minute. Just one question. And I'm going to turn it over to Ben, but it says here, a landlord of a single-family dwelling may not prohibit a tenant or prospective tenant from opening a family child care home on the leased premises by refusing to offer the premises for lease, negotiating on the premises lease sale, imposing unreasonable limitations or conditions, or otherwise acting in bad faith to prevent the use of leased premises as a family home care. So Ben, if you could expand upon that, I appreciate it. That's on page 3.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Chair Holmes. So the tenant operating the family child care home is still subject to all of the requirements that are in place for the operation of a family child care home that's like currently regulated.
So
and
including, I took to the point, Bill's point, local zoning potentially is
there is a provision in the bill, Chair Holmes, on
page
lines.
4, line 4, G.
That's right.
Okay. I guess I'm just trying to think about how this works. And so the landlord says yes, then I would have to give the landlord another month's security deposit because it's assumed in the state now it's only a month. This bill,
May.
they may ask. So in the case of May, they may say, because of that, I am requiring another month's security deposit from you because you're managing this daycare in this facility.
Yes, but Ben, verify that for me, please.
That's correct, Chair Holmes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then my last question, I'm writing at least 60 days, okay. And so the refusal, just so I'm clear, the refusal of use will come from potentially the inspection of the space from like a health department or a housing agency to say that this facility is not necessarily fit. And if it turned around and said, you need A, B, and C to be able to have this daycare, would the tenant then be allowed either through the landlord or through themselves to make the necessary changes to then make the space um uh kind of
Permitted.
in compliance to permit to be able to have the facility?
That's a very good question. I didn't see any specific language in the bill of that. Ben, can you expand upon that, please?
Okay, thanks, Chair Holmes. Yeah, so I guess the best way I could answer that is they're still going to be subject to all of the family child care,
Right.
yeah, like regulation that's in effect. This is really just about the landlord of a single family dwelling and kind of what they can do or can't do regarding the having a family child care home on the premises.
They still, all the licensing requirements that are in place have to be adhered to uh, by the tenant providing family home care center use.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Delegate Healy, you are next.
Okay, thank you. Along the very same lines, I think we're thinking along the same lines. I wanted to know two things. First of all, just following up on what Delegate Boyce asked about, would the landlord be required to allow modifications to the property in order to accommodate a childcare on that premises? In other words, if they needed to add another exit for the fire department regulations, or they needed to have more open space, or for children to be able to be in the spaces together, or that kind of thing, to meet the standards, would the landlord have to allow modifications to their property?
I'm going to ask Ben to expand upon it, but the way I'm reading this, this is what I am assuming happens. You are in an existing space. You now apply for a license in this existing space. Based upon your suggestion, Delegate Healy, you do not have a second exit, therefore you cannot get a permit. That's the way I'm interpreting this.
Okay, well, that was my question. I just wanted to make sure that the landlord would not be
Ben, if you could
required to
expand upon that, I
allow.
appreciate it.
That's also my that's also my understanding, Chair Holmes. There's of course again that part about being subject to the regulations that are required for a family childcare home to be licensed, and then there's I would think if the landlord is allowed to have restrictions or limitations, but they can't be imposing unreasonable limitations on the use of their premises as a childcare home. So
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the way I'm interpreting it, Delegate Healy. And I'm just using your example. The license requires an additional exit to the house. Therefore, your license would not be granted.
Okay, and so that would not be
Done deal.
considered
Done
being
deal.
unreasonable by not saying you can't be forced to add another exit or entrance or whatever.
That certainly sounds unreasonable to me.
Okay, that's number one. And the other question is, does the tenant who's going to operate this daycare, which is a home daycare, do they have to actually live on the premises? Is this their residence where they live and they share it, the space they have with children that they're going to take care of?
It is my interpretation. I'm going to ask Ben to expand upon, excuse me, expand upon this. This person has to have a lease with the landlord. Therefore, they have to have a regular, legal lease with the landlord for that property that they're in. Ben, if you could expand upon that, I appreciate it.
thanks, Chair Holmes. Yeah, that's also my understanding as well. I don't know that it's like the bill doesn't specify that the tenant has to reside in the property, but yeah.
That's the normal expectation, but I just wanted to make sure that this doesn't create new situations that don't
Sure.
exist now.
I
That's all.
appreciate that. That is not, I'm hopeful that's not my intent as well. Same as yours, Delegate Healy.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Delegate Naraka, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple questions, if that's okay. Actually, I have three
Sure.
of them. Okay. Thank you, sir. My first one is about the insurance amount, the $1 million there. I'm curious where that number came from. I operate in several different commercial spaces right now, and for instance, in a couple of them, I've got to carry $2 million worth of insurance. So I'm just curious why 1 million. What about that number, and why the cap at 1 million? I don't know if anyone can answer that question.
Location.
Well, my understanding is that insurance amount came from the Child Care Insurance, the Office of Child Care Insurance, property casualty insurance title. That's where my understanding of it.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'm looking at something that Delegate Guyton gave us, and it looks like they have an amount of 300,000, but they say at least 300,000. They don't put a cap on the number, so they don't say it could only be a certain number. They say at least that, but I could be wrong about that, Mr. Chair. So I'm just curious why we're putting a cap.
Yeah, and as I understand it, the amendment, and Ben, if you could expand upon it, I'd appreciate it. The landlord may not require a tenant to have liability insurance of not more than $1 million. Ben, if you could expand upon that, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Chair Holmes. So a couple of things. Yeah, the $1 million floor was or the ceiling was set to provide, in theory, adequate insurance coverage while still acknowledging, I suppose, a requirement for some sort of upper level to prevent, in orders of magnitude more than that, such that it could be prohibitive on the establishment of a family child care home. The provision that was cited, that is that concerns what I think they're using at least, because that's a requirement that an insurer is providing at least $300,000 in liability. So that's kind of like maybe the distinction between the two, and that's an insurer who's issuing the liability insurance for a family child care home.
That on the 23rd.
Okay. But so just so I understand, we just sort of picked $1 million out of, just because $1 million is a big number.
Oh yeah. And Chair Holmes.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chair Holmes. Let's see, the last, I guess, item on that was Delegate Guyton had been speaking with.
So, okay, it's one out.
The 23rd.
Can somebody mute Siliberti, please?
Thank you. Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you. Delegate Guyton has been speaking with one of their contacts on the bill, and then that was sort of discussed as like an appropriate amount of insurance that's relative to what they've had in the past.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. At least a little bit of understanding there about that. I do have two more, Mr. Chair. My next one is, what about, and I have actually now a couple of these popping up in my district. It seems, I guess, because the population is graying a little bit. I have several age-restricted communities that have single-family homes. So would there be no restriction that could be put in place in those kinds of communities that are 55 and above for someone to operate a family child care in those communities if it's a single family home?
I don't see anything in the language that prohibits this going into an age-restricted home, except, no, I don't see anything in the language at all.
I don't either, Mr. Chair. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, Ben, you want to expand upon that?
Sure. Yeah. There's the single family homes. There's no provision about age restriction in the bill. There's maybe the members saw that there is that provision about prohibitions against or restrictions on family child care homes imposed by condos or cooperative housing corporations. But that's probably the closest to that, if that's helpful or not.
And the language in this particular bill is restricting these operations to single family homes only.
Right.
Not that specifically addresses your question, Delegate Naraki.
Yes, sir.
But at least
Mr. Chair, I do have a couple of these that are age-restricted communities
sure. Likewise.
in single-family homes. That's why I'm asking that question. I'm not sure that those communities would be maybe as excited about the child care centers in those communities as maybe some other areas were. So I think that's something that may want to be looked at inside of the bill. One final question, Mr. Chair. When we're looking at the ability to have the landlord as a co-insured, Mr. Chair, I know you are very familiar with this. Oftentimes, landlords place properties in an LLC, so it's pretty common where you will have the landlord and the ability to have the LLC of that. The landlord might have several LLCs, like this shopping center, or that property is one LLC, so you can co-insure both that property and the landlord in general. I'm just curious if the way that this is constructed, the language there would prohibit kind of co-insuring both in this case. So the landlord is maybe as a larger company, Homes Inc., just as an example, and Homes Inc. Owns this particular property, which is 123 LLC. So often, what you'll see constructed in these leases is that both can be named as, or not both, they're required to be named as co-insured.
Co-insured.
And I don't know that this language would allow that here.
Well, the way I'm interpreting it, utilizing the Homes 123 LLC owning the property, the Homes LLC 123 will be co-insured with the tenant.
Right, but then the umbrella company, the Homes Real Estate Group, may not also be able to be insured there, and I think that we may want to tighten that up to allow both to be co-insured. Not only the LLC that owns the individual property, but the umbrella company that may own multiple LLCs.
And what kind of language would you suggest for that, Delegate Naraki, for the umbrella?
Sure, I would say that you could have more than one, companies co-insured or something like that. In fact, Mr. Chair, I could look at one of my leases and tell you what it says inside of the lease. I don't have it right in front of me right now, but I could tell you kind of what that language says in a lease, and I could certainly send that over to you, Mr. Chair.
Let me suggest that. Let me suggest this, Delegate Naraki. I want to move this along. Therefore, what I would like for you to do, I am concerned about your discussion also. If you could put that together for us for our discussion in full committee.
Sure.
I would
Happy to do
appreciate
so, Mr.
that.
Chair.
Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Delegate Boyce, you have the floor. And I'm sorry, one thing before you get started, Delegate Boyce. Ben, could you make a notation for us to follow up with Delegate Naraki on this umbrella scenario with the co-insured? I'd appreciate it so that we don't forget it. Delegate Boyce, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I was wanted to first of all say I want to thank the sponsor for the bill. I fully am going to support this bill. I currently have a neighbor in my community. She's lived there for as long as I have, if not longer, who rents her home and who has a child care facility in the in her rental home. And so I'm glad to see something that probably is common practice being legislated. And so I want to thank the sponsor for that. I wanted to address Delegate Naraki's question about the age restrictions, and I'm wondering, it sounds like you said line 12 on page 3.2 probably covers that, but in most age restricted communities, they have an age restriction. And so I'm wondering, I'm thinking that it wouldn't be permitted anyway, because in age restricted communities, there tend to be age restrictions, if that makes any sense, as it relates to children. Like, you can visit grandma and grandpa or auntie and uncle, but usually there are provisions about the inability to stay with the family member within those communities, and especially in rental communities. But also, I would think it would be the opposite. I don't know too many senior communities that are standalone homes unless they're retirement homes, and therefore I don't think there's so much of an age restriction. It just happens to be everybody of the same age just lives there because they're all retired. So I wanted to point that out. And I wanted to talk back about the insurance. I just want to be clear about the insurance. It means, while it says insurance policy with coverage limits of not more than $1 million, it means it could be less than $1 million.
That is correct. Ben,
Okay, I'm done.
Okay, thank you.
I'm done, boss. Thanks.
All right, so we have, I'm sorry, Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If it's in the subcommittee's will, I would, I'm happy to do this in full committee after we talk to the sponsor, but I actually I reread the bill. I have a major age restricted community in my district that has a ton of single family homes in it. I would be interested in maybe pursuing an exemption for age restricted communities. I don't think we necessarily need to do it right now. I want to make sure we can move things along quickly with the subcommittee, and also I want to make sure I check in with the sponsor, so I'm not going, stepping on her toes, but just wanted to flag that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. In most age-restricted communities, within their governing documents and within their CCRs, covenants, conditions, and restrictions, they do have language in there that might cover this. So if you could, Delegate Stewart, look into that and let's propose something during full committee, I'd appreciate that as well. All right. Delegate Baker. You're muted.
You're on mute, Delegate Baker.
You do sound very good though, Baker.
I am, well, thank you. So if the tenant refuses to pay the requested second month's security deposit, does that mean they will not be able to operate?
The tenant, the landlord may require that as part of the conditions to operate the,
I understand that. So is that a must for the tenant to have to come up with the second month's security?
that is
deposit?
my understanding, yes, and I will verify, I have been verify that.
Okay, the other question, are the realtors favorable or unfavorable?
I don't have the testimony in front of me, Ben. Can you answer that? I don't have all that in front of me.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Holmes. So I think with the security deposit question, I think usually the security deposits in general cases, practically the way that this could work is the security deposit is, being expected before the tenancy is actually beginning.
Yes.
And so that would probably address the majority of the concerns. There could be a case where maybe down the line, the tenant is informing the landlord of that. It could get, that's less clear, but they're still required under the bill to pay 2 months rent. And then regarding the question about the realtor's testimony, I think their main issue that they had was about the 2 months of security deposit not being enough to cover the
That's right.
wear and tear of a
Yeah.
yeah.
And we have it in the legislation is capped at 2 months. So I
Okay.
guess Delegate
Do
Baker,
they still have concerns? Will their concerns be addressed any further?
it is not the intention of this subcommittee or the sponsor, I don't think at this point, to increase the security deposit beyond the 2 months, that's currently listed in the legislation.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Delegate Healy, you took your hand down. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we have before us amendments to HB 911 with the understanding that there may be a couple more amendments coming to us during the full committee. I have a motion and a second on the amendments. All in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition to the amendments? And I'm going to scroll through here. I do not see any hands up, nor do I see any hands waving. Therefore, I move the bill 911 as amended. Do I have a
Second.
There's a motion and a second on HB 911 as amended. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor of HB 911 as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition to 911? I have Baker. Hang on a second here. Baker, and that's all that I have. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We will now go to SB Senate Bill 63. Senate Bill 63 is Reserve Study Bill, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you've heard about it a couple of times before. This is the Reserve Study Bill, which is a cross file of HB 292. And in the Senate bill, there is one major piece of revision in this bill that I'm going to have Ben to explain it to you, ladies and gentlemen. If you would, Ben, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Chair Holmes. I'm pulling the bill up. We'll take a look at it. Okay, so as amended, the revised fiscal note came back. There's no fiscal impact. The Senate with SB 63 was cross-filed with Chair Holmes was HB 292. Subcommittee has reviewed HB 292. The Senate adopted the HB 292 amendments to the bill, but they made one additional change, and that is in each ownership or housing type for cooperatives, condos, and homeowners associations. The Senate added a provision about borrowing from reserves. This was discussed in the subcommittee when the subcommittee was considering HB 292. The specific language is on the screen now, lines 9 through 13. Specifically in paragraph 4, that's been added, stating that reserves can be used for purposes other than those specified in the funding plan. The funding plan is the plan for how reserves are collected and the budgeting process that goes into that. But the Senate's adding this language here that they can be used for other purposes than those specified in the funding plan, so long as it's being repaid to the reserve fund within 5 years. The basis for this, CAI, Maryland's Legislative Action Committee, was noting that borrowing from reserves can be a common practice and necessary when operating expenses exceed operating funds. Otherwise, a community could be forced to levy a special assessment. And then one example was winter weather events that can regularly go beyond what was budgeted for in the operating budget. And then that could otherwise necessitate borrowing from reserves to meet those expenditures as they come up. And I understand, Chair Holmes, you've considered these amendments, and yep, and that's the amendment for each of the ownership types.
Thank you, Ben. I want to make sure everyone understands that that what Ben just read is the only amendment that the Senate put onto the bill that we passed out of here.
Can I
Now,
move the amendment, sir?
thank you very much. Is there a second on the amendment? I thought I saw a hand raised.
Second, it was my,
Second. Okay, very good. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I move SB 63 as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on SB 63 as amended? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of SB 63 as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Oh,
I see Baker. Hang on a second. Let me get my pen here. I see Baker is in opposition. Any other opposition on SB 63? I see Naraki.
Delegate Naraki.
I see Naraki. Where's Naraki? Naraki. Okay. Naraki. And who else is in opposition? Naraki, Baker. So I have 2. All right. Thank you very much. That means that SB 63 will receive a favorable recommendation from the Housing and Real Property. We will now go to SB 513, Ben. Give us an overview of that if you don't mind.
Okay, thanks, Chair Holmes. I'll pull up the screen here. One moment. One second. Okay, so there is a no House cross file for this bill. This is Senate Bill 513, real property, unlawfully restrictive covenant modifications, county or municipality notice requirements. There's no state or local fiscal impact as introduced. What the bill does, there's a minor amendment, but some background on the bill, restrictive covenants that prohibit property ownership based on race, religious belief, or national origin are unlawful under current law. And so right now, a county or a municipality can execute and record modifications to these restrictive covenants that are unlawful if the property is located in that county or municipality, as long as they're providing notice for executing that modification. The local jurisdiction needs to provide the notice that's required is specified in beginning with line 28 here, where they need to provide it removes the requirement to provide notice by first-class mail and instead requires notice in newspapers that are once per week published for 4 successive weeks, and then also posting on the official website of the county or municipality. And that has to be done at least 30 days before executing a modification. This notice needs to be provided. The basis behind the bill was striking this provision here about first-class mail because that was the city of Tacoma Park was noting that it's an enormous administrative and fiscal burden on the city, and it's kind of vague. They were saying what an ownership interest is. So that was the basis behind removing that. And the amendment was presented at Chair Holmes by Delegate Healy. I know you have worked with Delegate Healy on this amendment, changing it to be, it's the and here, so that it is a posting, the notice has to be the website posting and the newspaper publication. This, I checked with MML and MACO, they did not have an objection, and the city of Tacoma Park also did not have an objection to the bill as amended, Chair Holmes.
Thank you, Ben. And before we move forward, move onward, I move a motion favorable on the amendments. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the amendments. Let's have a discussion. Delegate Boyce, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did we not pass something like this last year, the year before?
It
Didn't
sounds
Delegate
very,
Solomon or somebody from Montgomery County, I felt like had this bill? Am I
sounds
making
very-
that up?
very familiar to me as well. Delegate Healy?
And that was about a municipal change to their charter.
Got
was
it.
It was in local government, and
Got it.
they actually agreed to hand deliver it door to door. It's and instead of publishing 4 times, they published it once. But that was a different situation.
Okay.
Okay, so this is new as it relates to counties and municipalities who have communities that have restrictive covenants that are
Okay.
not being used, but otherwise it still reflects.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. Obsolete and offensive.
Thank you, Delegate Healy. Any discussion on the amendments? We have a motion and a second on the amendments. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendments signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All in opposition of the amendments, let me raise your hand or say hello or something.
Aye.
I see none. I move SB 513 as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on SB 513 as amended? Delegate Baker, you have the floor.
Please unmute yourself, Delegate Baker.
I'm a slow learner, be patient.
I'll have to admit, Delegate Baker, you sound much better when you're muted, but go ahead.
Ben had mentioned that MML was favorable. I thought I read in my testimony that they were unfavorable. And that's just a curious
Ben?
Yes,
question
thank
to
you.
me.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Chair Holmes. MML withdrew their opposition to the bill,
Okay, thank you.
and I confirmed that with them this morning.
Thank you, Ben. And Ben, thank you. I want to make sure I publicly thank you for staying on top of all these things on a minute-by-minute basis. I really appreciate that, Ben. SB 513 is in front of us as amended. We have a motion and a second already on SB 513. All in favor of SB 513 as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All in opposition, raise your hand or wave or something. I see no opposition to SB 513 as amended. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We will now go to the final bill of the day, SB 436. This is Maryland Department of Labor. Ben, if you could give us an overview of SB 436, I certainly would appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Chair Holmes. I'm going to pull up the screen here just to, these aren't amendments. The bill is unamended, to be clear, the Senate bill. The House bill, there's a House cross-file that was sponsored by Delegate Stewart. This is the Senate cross-file. There is, the fiscal impact is the same for both bills. I know there was some discussion about that when the subcommittee had the House version that they were considering, but the Senate bill is the same as the House bill, but with three flags here or differences. And I checked with the House sponsor and the Senate sponsor's office, and they are good with the Senate version. The Senate version, the distinction is with this study on the building code requirements for single staircase buildings. There's part of it where the Department of Labor is carrying out the study. They're doing it in consultation, not just with the Office of the State Fire Marshal, or the House bill had added the Office of State Fire Marshal, but the Senate bill also has added a few other entities in addition to the Office of the State Fire Marshal, which was the only one that the House bill initially added in amendments. So those additional entities are the Professional Firefighters of Maryland, a representative of the State Firefighters Association, a representative of the Maryland Fire Chiefs Association, a representative of the Metropolitan Fire Chiefs Association, a representative of the Office of the State Fire Marshal, which was the one, again, provision that the subcommittee had added to the House bill, and then also a Maryland nonprofit organization that advocates for safe and affordable housing. There was a little bit of a concern that these additional entities might result in an increased fiscal note, but it's still the same at $58,000 in fiscal year 2026 for both bills, Chair Holmes.
Thank you, Ben. And just for clarification, what is in front of us right now, Senate Bill 436, there are no amendments on Senate Bill 436. Is that correct?
Correct, Chair Holmes.
So I'm going to ask Delegate Stewart to make a motion on this bill.
I'll move favorable. Mr. Chair, thanks.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on SB 436. Any questions on SB 436? Seeing no questions, all in favor of SB 436, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Seeing none, SB 436 will receive a favorable report from this subcommittee. Ladies and gentlemen of Housing and Real Property, as usual, you've done a fantastic job. And thank you, Delegate Ciliberti, for joining us. We appreciate your time here. And we shall see you all very soon.
Bye.